too am not that old. I'm honored to be here today to share my personal thoughts on the theme for this 56th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, the empowerment of rural women, their role in poverty and hunger eradication, development, and current challenges. And to further the conversation on women's roles in peace and security processes and its relations to food security. If you ask me to reframe the theme for this year's CSW, I would have reframed it to be enhancing rural women's power, a major factor for poverty and hunger eradication, lessons learned, and advancing best practices. I will share briefly my thoughts on the theme, rural women, key constituents to global peace and human security. Over the last few years, as a women's rights and peace activist, I've been from one rural community to the other, from Liberia to Sierra Leone to Nigeria to Cote d'Ivoire to Ghana, different places, Congo DRC, long ago, some parts of Zimbabwe. During these years, I've never been to a place where women in those communities had no idea on what needed to be done in order to transform their situation within their communities. They all knew this is what we want, this is where we're going, and this is what we think is needed in order to take us to where we want to go. Liberian women are celebrated globally for their role in contributing to ending the Civil War. What I would like to tell you today is that a vast majority of the women in Pray the Devil Back to Hell, the women you see in different communities, were rural women. The movement spread from one community to over 20 communities in 9 counties. What is equally important to note is that none of us can stand and boast that we had to leave Monrovia to mobilize women in the rural areas. As soon as someone from their community passed and went back and said, we were in Monrovia and we saw a group of women protesting, the next day a movement was born in that community. In 2007, we covered all 5 regions of Sierra Leone in our advocacy for violence-free elections. Rural women organized the campaign, they identified key stakeholders, we went in to lend our support. What was amazing for me was by the time we got into the communities, the women had mapped out who you talk to, what you talk about, and where you're taking your talk. By the time we ended that campaign, not to our credit, but to the credit of the rural women of Sierra Leone, the president said we had a peaceful elections because of the women's role. Rural women are key constituents in the quest for global peace. In many rural communities, these women keep communities stable when all else is chaotic. In our own community in Liberia, it was women who kept things going. I personally, as a young child, had to wake up every morning, walk from checkpoint to checkpoint to find food. They had deep insights on how and why the conflict started. And we say how and why. And when the conflict practitioners come, they say we've brought in analysts and experts. If we have to quantify the knowledge of these women, they are conflict analysts in their own context. When it's time for disarmament, rural women can tell you where the huge cache of arms are usually hidden. You're looking for DDR experts, go into the rural communities. It is without a doubt that women's involvement in peace and security processes during conflict has contributed is contributing to peaceful resolution to community conflict and nation building. The question we have to ask ourselves today as women from NGOs, women from government, women in the communities, policy makers, are they receiving the due recognition for their efforts? The answer is no. Is it recognized that their roles are significant components in said processes? On paper, yes. In reality, we still have a lot to do. Giving rural women roles in keeping their communities together during and their roles in picking up the pieces after conflict, you will imagine that post-conflict rehabilitation and reconstruction processes will target these women as a major resource. However, women in rural communities are often engaged months into the processes. Their needs, priorities, and concerns become an afterthought agenda item. In most of our communities that we see and work in, it is after the fact that everyone is rushing and saying we need to empower rural women. In one of the local communities I worked in years ago, people had gone in to teach these rural women tie and dye, soap making, and sewing. During the farming season, the project broke down. And everyone was wondering why this golden opportunity had been provided these women and they were not taking advantage of this opportunity. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that if they don't farm, they will not eat. The sewing and tie and dye is too strange to their communities. And in conversation with one of the experts, gender experts, from one of our international partners, the question was, why don't you empower them in what they already know? Why don't you take machines and give to them so that instead of bending over for 10 hours a day trying to dig, you can teach them how to drive a tilling machine? Why don't you teach them food preservation? Why don't you come and help to build the farm to market roads? In that way, you are not empowering, you are enhancing the skills they already have. You can imagine that whilst partners and nations are planning for security sector reform processes, rural women insights on the needs of community members will be considered. Sadly, the focus of SSR today is still on conventional security, whilst overlooking the human security needs of communities. This, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is the breeding ground for renewed conflict. People's expectations after conflict, after the signing of peace agreements, and after elections are high. Life, a better life, is primary to them. Many rural and local communities are not interested in the jet bombers or the sophistication of an army or the paramilitary. What is key to them is women going to give birth without losing their lives and the lives of their babies. What is key to them is their sons and daughters gaining quality education, access to safe drinking water, access to farm and market road, and access to basic medical needs. What is equally important to note, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, is that in many of these communities where such is not happening, it is the women again, rural women, no formal education, who have stepped up to the plate, forming family cooperatives, business groups, local financial clubs to subsidize what government have failed to provide and what the international community in most cases fails to deliver. Over the last few months, President Sirleaf asked me to lead the National Reconciliation Initiative of Liberia. And as part of the journey to setting an agenda for reconciliation, I have been resolute that we will not sit in some plush office in Monrovia and design reconciliation programs for communities. So we've been taking these county tours. The first 3 counties we went to, in conversation with the women, one county that really struck me, 15 hours almost away from Monrovia, these women have formed themselves into a financial club. And what they do is they identify a woman in the community who has lost everything, husband is gone, abandoned the children with her, and have nothing. They come together and give that one woman 100,000 Liberian dollars, which is like less than 1,000 US dollars. And what they say to this woman is, we will stand behind you as you start your business. But what is equally important, as this woman starts her business, these women are helping her to build a house. So one after the other, women in that community are owning houses, but beyond that, their businesses are growing. I stepped into Leymah County, and these women have farming cooperatives where they sell their farming produce in bulk, and they're able to also provide assistance. But also in terms of empowering rural women, we went to one of those communities, and there's a huge political debate about dividing up this community because politicians and local leaders, predominantly men, cannot see their way clear, or they don't seem to have a political future. In all of the conversations across these communities, it is the women who knew not to just battle through the meetings. They will tell you, this is the problem, these are the individuals that we think are responsible, and this is the solution we think we need to take in order to move forward. When I went to my own hometown, Bond County, in the local leaders meeting, everyone was talking about this other person, that other person, but the local chief said, you know, I don't want to mention names because I want, when we sit together, you know, the really political way, we have a problem, but we'll not identify those who have the problem. We will keep it under the carpet until later on we go into our private bush. We went to the women's meeting, and the women stood up and said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they kept naming names. And said, when you get back to Monrovia, tell them the women of Bond County say they are the problem to reconciliation in this community. Do they need empowerment? Do they need the political course to tell them that this is what you need? No. Women in these communities already, because they bear the brunt, they are the ones who are in the middle of it. And if you ask me, they have the best solution to some of these problems. Women